Greetings. Tony, how are you?
Good, Peter.
It's Melbourne's Donut Day.
That's it. We've done it. Put in the hard yards.
Though, so
You still got your health.
oh dear.
YouTube is now live. So,
Oh, are you seeing my intro slide?
yep, you should see it on the SAA TV icon.
Oh, yeah, beautiful.
Have you ejected anyone yet?
No, I'm looking forward to it. Mind you, you wiggling around your seat there. I got close the other week. What was going on?
I must have been on the bike.
Yeah, a lot of pelvic hip moves and things.
I gave 2 presentations on Thursday at Melbourne Uni to the engineering department.
Okay.
Now they were on how I stayed fit during COVID isolation.
Oh, wow.
So I took the analog space mission concepts and applied them to the exercise that I do in lockdown.
Oh, fantastic. Hang on, I'm just going to shut the door.
Just 15 minutes each one, but they were fun because I was writing for the whole presentation for each of them.
All right, back. All right, we're getting closer. 7:27 by my count. Is that audio coming through, Ash? Ashley?
No audio coming through from the video.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll stop the sharing and I didn't do the little, what's the name you're supposed to do. Share computer sound. Right.
Ashley, can you give me permission to record, or will you do it?
Give it to you now. 1 second.
Let me know when you're ready, Mike.
Should have it now, Michael.
Okay, got it.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the, what is it, October 2020 SAA meeting of the Space Association of Australia. My slides aren't advancing for some reason. Anyway, thank you for coming along and joining us. As we probably have mentioned many times before, we usually meet face-to-face at a pub in South Melbourne, but we haven't been doing that for most of the year. So hopefully this is one of the last virtual meetings we'll be doing, but we'll see what happens. We had some good news today here in Victoria, so that's good. So just a quick run through what I'm just going to do a quick update of some news around the association. There's not a lot, actually, as you'd probably imagine. Then we'll do a quick news update, space news update. And then we're going to have our feature presentation on the OSIRIS-REx mission with Clemens Unger. And then I'm going to do a bit of a summary look back at the International Space Station, which has been occupied for 20 years continuously this coming November. And it will end up around 9:30, although often we end up finishing up about 10:30, so that's fine. I'll just go back a couple of slides. There is an ability, we've found that rather than using the chat function in Zoom, that we've put up, is it here? No, okay. We've got a website, a Slido website with a specific URL for our meeting. Here it is. It's in your invitation to the Zoom meeting, I think, or at least the event page on the Space Association website. But if you can grab that Slido URL, you can jump in and ask questions there. And the way that works is that people can ask a question, and if other people think it's a really good question, they can vote it up. So there might be 10 questions, and everyone's asking someone's asking a red hot question. Other people can vote that up to the top of the list. So we might end up asking that one first. So we find that this is a good way of doing it rather than trying to interrupt trying to keep track of all the chats that are happening on Zoom. So have a go at that. So with that, I'll just start off with this Space Association news. We've mentioned every month, basically since May. We're supposed to have had a AGM of the association back in May. Obviously with COVID, we haven't been able to meet physically. We've pushed it back until we hopefully will meet again at some point. At this stage, we don't have a date. It looks like we might be able to meet possibly November or December. Whether we'll actually schedule an AGM for that time frame, we'll have a chat with the committee and we'll work out whether we're going to do that. The AGM, of course, just looks at the books of the Space Association, general themes and functions, and the people that are on the committee, etc., etc. So we'll let you know, the members, we'll let you know whenever that comes to pass. As I've mentioned, we did have public meetings in South Melbourne at the pub called the Golden Gate Hotel. It was a great place. We'd go upstairs, we'd have dinner, and we'd have a few drinks, and we'd have our meetings, and it was a very pleasant environment. They are super keen to have us back and keep asking us every month, or keep updating us every month on what they can and can't do. As I say, we've had these announcements today. We'll have to look at that, what that might translate into, whether it's actually feasible, possible and desirable to have our meeting maybe in November, but at this stage we're going to go virtual unless you hear otherwise. It's in November. We do have a secured date for December for an end-of-year event at the pub. They've locked it in. Once again, all pending confirmation that we can actually do that. And also, we're not quite sure, as people probably have been aware, we've done trivia nights in the past. whether we're going to bother doing that this time or just basically spend the night having a social get-together because we've had like 7 months of nothing, we might end up just doing that. So we'll be in touch, but pencil in that date of the 14th of December. It's a Monday. And hopefully we'll maybe just get together, have a nice social dinner and talk about the year that was. Not much to talk about. Oh, no, we are a non-profit, non-political group. We basically run by our memberships to fund our activities. And membership is recommended if you can do it. We'd love to have you on board. It allows you to vote in the AGM. It funds our events. It funds our people may or may not know we do a weekly radio program. It funds that. And we do outreach events, et cetera, when it's possible. So if you're willing and able, jump along to our website. You can join online. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick news roundup. Not comprehensive. I don't want to bore you silly. You're probably across most of it anyway. Just a quick update on Australian space news. The government recently released this Make It Happen, the Australian government's modern manufacturing strategy. That was on October 1st. So they identified 6 priority areas to support the $1.5 billion manufacturing plan. And Lovell it's resource and technology, food, beverage, medical products, recycling, clean energy, defence, and space made into the list. So that's really good. So this quote here is from within the strategy document itself. The space technologies enable activity across the economy. Emerging global position is underpinned by research expertise. So business can benefit from the booming $1 trillion world future space industry. So it's nice that the government's got on the radar and it'll be provided over the forward estimates period. So it's good. It's maintaining its high-ish profile. Unlike many thought in the past, that if we established an agency, it would become a thing of ridicule. I think everyone really is now embracing the space economy and the opportunities that it presents. So that's fantastic. It shows a bit of maturity in the Australian acceptance of high-tech and entrepreneurial activities in that area. So good on them. October 14, we signed on to the Artemis Accords, of the first partner countries to do that. And this is an online thing that took place with Bridenstine. So there we are amongst Canada, Italy, Japan, the US, UK and UAE and Luxembourg. So we're in good company there. So that was held at the 71st International Astronautical Congress, once again virtually. So those Artemis Accords, people can look it up, but they're grounded on the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. But essentially it gives the people an ability to conduct off-Earth mining and exploitation without claiming ownership of it, but at least being able to reap the resources from those activities. So it's obviously more detailed than that, but I welcome you to look it up. Australian Space Agency uses VR to train for space exploration. The International Space Investment Initiative supports 10 grant recipients on work programs with the International Space Agencies. So Ray Trace is one of those successful grant recipients. They're in Queensland, and they've got a code name Titan Lake. Ray Trace has developed underwater virtual reality training simulations for astronauts. This sounds really good. I want to have a go at this. So an astronaut will be training for lunar orbit or Martian orbit, and they could conduct a space station at the International Space Station with the Earth below. So they'll be able to work in a live simulation training environment with virtual scenes produced relevant to where they are. So they've got like a neutral buoyancy lab in Brisbane, and there's one in, as people probably know, in the US, with a full-size mock-up of the International Space Station. So the idea here is that astronauts could be training for spacewalks, not only with the physical sensations of near neutral gravity, which is produced by being in a pool, but also the visuals in their helmets. So that sounds really cool. So, I mean, NASA already does VR training, but they sit on a chair and wiggle their hands around in the air. So this takes it one step beyond that. So that sounds really good. So just push out a little bit wider, some global space news. This was me back in my early reporting days. They awarded $400 million of contracts to both demonstrate technologies for lunar exploration and send an ice drilling payload to the South Pole of the Moon. So they ordered an order worth $47 million to Intuitive Machines, one of 14 companies in the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program. So they got this Polar Resources Ice Mining Experiment, Prime 1. And that's going to be going at the end of 2022, so not that far away. Prime is a 40-kilogram payload designed to look for water at depths of up to 1 metre. So I've got the US spelling there. And it'll test near-infrared spectrometer, mass spectrometer, and drill at NASA that NASA plans to fly on volatiles, investigating polar exploration rover mission in 2023. So interesting. People may know or may be aware that there was they've already had a first commercial crew flight to the ISS on a Crew Dragon. They're going to have a second one, which was the actual first Operation Crew 1 mission. It's going to be delayed now to possibly mid-November. They haven't really set a date yet. They had some issues with one of their SpaceX rockets, some engine performance, and they want to explore that and really understand what's going on before they put some more people on board. So watch this space on that one. Now, that they're unlikely to join the NASA-led lunar program. So the head of the Russian Space Agency said that the Gateway mini space station that NASA plans to build around the moon is too US-centric, and added that Russia is unlikely to have a significant contribution. They're also open to extending the life of the International Space Station to 2028 or 2030. And they're determined to maintain accommodation for cosmonauts in low Earth orbit no matter which decision is finally taken regarding the ISS. So obviously, I think some of the plans or some of the push internal in the US anyway, in some of the NASA areas, is that they're spending a lot of money on the ISS every year, and they want to be able to divert that money to other programs like the SLS and those things. But the Russians want to keep it going, so we'll see where that ends up. And also NASA safety panel, have got some more doubts about the Starliner test schedule. As people may or may not know, the Starliner is the other half of the commercial crew program, the other one being the SpaceX vehicle, SpaceX Crew Dragon. This panel doubts that the work can be done in time to allow another test flight this year. As people may recall, they had a test flight, unmanned test flight last year in December of 2019, and they had all sorts of problems, didn't dock the ISS, and some reports say that they almost destroyed the whole vehicle. They did get it down, but missed a lot of the milestones, and subsequently they found a lot of problems with the design. Well, not so much the design, but the testing and integration, I think, was the main problem. Yeah, so they saw this series of problems. So Don McLaren had said Boeing was making substantial progress. Second uncrewed test flight with the company earlier this year. It will fly last December. He said that the Starliner crew module will fly the OFT-2 mission. Is about 80% complete, and the service module is 9. They announced August 28th that the OFT mission would be more earlier than December. So who knows when that will happen. In other Starliner news, Chris Ferguson, he was a former NASA astronaut, and he was to command the first crew flight of Boeing CST-100 Starliner. He's actually a Boeing astronaut as opposed to a NASA astronaut. He's a former NASA astronaut who flew the last shuttle mission. So he was withdrawn from the from the mission for personal reasons. He joined Boeing in 2011 after being at NASA, and he was to lead the crew flight test, which is now currently scheduled to go in the middle of 2021. It includes astronauts Nicole Mann and Mike Fink. To quote him, the decision is not made lightly. It surrounds what was really amounted to a year that was replete with family obligations. However, so he's going to be replaced by Barry Butch Wilmore. Now, for those people out there who may or may not know Scott Manley, he put out a video recently on this crew change, and one of the speculations that he made, which I think is quite valid, is that as people may recall, when the SpaceX commercial crew vehicle went up, they actually stayed longer than initially planned because they were unsure about the performance of the vehicle, and by having them on much longer, the crew actually performed some spacewalks and other jobs on the space station, International Space Station. One of the speculations that Scott Manley's got is that because Ferguson is now a Boeing astronaut, that might preclude him from doing any NASA work for them, and therefore limit the ability to make maximum use of the 3 crew members being up there. So I urge you, if you just do a quick search on Scott Manley YouTube, and you'll find that story. So Scott's always got a good head on his shoulders, and always good to listen to that accent. Now, this came up recently. Fake asteroid, I should say. An expert identifies a mystery object as an old rocket. Instead of a cosmic rock, a newly discovered object appears to be an old rocket from a failed moon landing mission from 54 years ago. It's finally making his way back home. This is according to asteroid expert Paul Chundas. In fact, the whatever it is expected to get nabbed by Earth's gravity and become a mini moon next month. I guess November. It's estimated to be roughly 8 meters long based on its brightness, consistent with a rocket stage. He speculates that the asteroid 2020 SO is, as it's formerly known, is actually a Centaur upper stage rocket that successfully propelled NASA's Surveyor 2 lander to the moon in 1966 before it was discarded. So that's the stage there prior to its mission. The lander ended up crashing on the moon after one of its thrusters failed to ignite. And this is the vehicle on the pad. So that would be kind of interesting if that's in fact what it turns out to be. So the rocket, meanwhile, swept past the moon into orbit around the sun as intended junk, never to be seen again, but perhaps it's going to come back. There's also, I think others experts will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the ascent stage of Apollo 10 lunar module is actually in the same boat, floating out there in space somewhere. So it'd be nice if they can get those two back. Right. And me. So I assume Clemens on board and is here. We're going to have Clemens Unger, and he has a master's degree in chemistry and chemical technology from Technische Universität Darmstadt, and he's the OSIRIS-REx ambassador for NASA, and he's a STEM outreach ambassador. So he's going to give us a rundown on the results, the current status of the OSIRIS-REx mission. So then I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'll exit my show first. And yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll stop sharing, and there we go. And I believe you will be able to take control.
Okay. All right. Not sure if everyone can see me, so
We can see your desktop.
yeah.
Oh, and we can see your faces up there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not a very Zoom savvy person, so you have to forgive me a little bit. Okay, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak to the group, and I think it's a perfect opportunity, especially after the events of last week of the sample acquisition of OSIRIS-REx, and I would like to sort of tailor my talk a little bit. That I'd appreciate if people could ask questions, because otherwise it becomes a monologue and a little bit boring. So if anyone wants to interject and ask me a question, please do. And firstly, OSIRIS-REx, probably most of you had a little bit of a look, but I'll give you a rundown on the mission itself. It's part of the New Frontiers of NASA, which has a portfolio of really missions in it. One was New Horizons, which really made the headlines, and second one is Juno, which is still in orbit around Jupiter and does fantastic science. And the third one's OSIRIS-REx, to be followed by Dragonfly, which will hopefully send a helicopter to Titan. So OSIRIS-REx in full flight, launched an Atlas V from the Cape, and did a flyby of Earth in 2017, and to get a little gravitational boost and give it also the right inclination to catch up with Bennu, our target asteroid, which I will talk about in a little bit. And the spacecraft arrived in 2018. After the launch, it was a little bit quiet, and that makes my life as a STEM outreach person a little bit hard, because I speak predominantly to a younger audience in school, and once you shown the nice video of the launch, then along comes nothing, and that is for a lot of kids a little bit boring. But there is a lot of science happening also on the way. So at the flyby OSIRIS-REx of Earth.
Hi, Clem. Is there a PowerPoint presentation or something similar? We can only see your Internet Explorer or your Firefox view.
So I haven't got the presentation here on PowerPoint. I'm afraid I can't do this. So because I'm actually borrowing someone's computer here, and that it's all a little bit improvised. So I have to apologize for that, because all that lockdown. So
that's right. We just wanted to make sure that we weren't talking to a slide deck that we couldn't see.
No, sorry. So you have to bear with me a little bit. So so we had a flyby in 2017, catch up with the asteroid 2018, and then came a long phase of mapping, and which was done with a number of the cameras on board. OSIRIS-REx has a science suite of 5 science instruments consisting of cameras and spectrometers on board to study the asteroid. And the interesting part of Bennu is it's quite a rare species of asteroid. It's known as a carbonaceous chondrite, and it is predominantly made up of carbon compounds, which are thought to be the building blocks of life. So there are the theories that similar asteroids may have brought building blocks of life to Earth. So high interest there to acquire a sample from the asteroid. So once our spacecraft arrived, the science team was a little bit surprised because from the spectroscopy that was done in the lead up, we sort of anticipated that OSIRIS-REx has a fairly smooth surface made up out of regolith and fine structure. And once the first detailed photos were taken, it was actually utterly different. We saw that boulders up to the size of houses were strewn over the surface, and so a completely different appearance than initially expected, which then in turn gives problems in the sample acquisition that followed last week. So the facts about Bennu, maybe, just to give you sort of a little bit of a feel how big Bennu is and what the tricky part is doing spacecraft operations around an object like that. Bennu is about 500 meters in diameter, which is not a lot. And because of that, you have a very, very low gravity on the surface. And so acquiring a sample, for instance, and also staying in orbit around asteroid is a huge problem. And there was some expertise out there from the European Rosetta mission, most of you might be familiar with. And but the aim with Bennu was to actually run much, much closer orbits around the asteroid. The last orbits were at about 1 kilometer height above the surface, and that's obviously a huge challenge on the mission team. And so new sort of ground was charted there. The mapping ran in a series of orbital campaigns, starting with about 7 kilometers above the surface and then lowering down and identifying potential sampling sites. And in the process, once the surface was mapped, the team also involved a citizen science project to identify all the rocks on the surface that had been photographed and get a bit of a clearer idea where we could grab the sample. And 4 potential sites were identified. And after a long discussion, a site called Nightingale was finally selected, and in September, I believe it was, we had a try where the spacecraft did a simulated approach for the TACSAM, the touch and go sample acquisition, and the spacecraft went up to about 40 meters above the envisaged site, and it was so far quite okay. The problem was then identified that the actual sampling site had the size of the average shopping center car park with large boulders around it. And the fear with the mission planners was that the spacecraft potentially could get snagged on one of these boulders. And some of you might recall the fate of the Philae lander of Rosetta. And so we definitely wanted to avoid this. And so some tweaks to the final approach software were done, and ultimately culminating in last week's sampling attempt, which was successful, as you probably have seen on TV. It was widely shown, and we believe that we have a very large sample actually, and so that second sampling attempts won't take place. So it's only going to be the one, and the sample head, which is about the size of a big plate, is going to be stored in the sample return capsule. It'll take place very soon, and you will be able to see some better close-ups actually of the sampling head. And the spacecraft will do still some science, some spectroscopy, and will leave Bennu in March 2021 to return 2 years later in 2023 and perform a flyby of Earth. And the sample capsule, which has actually previously the design successfully flown, will return in Utah in 2023, and hopefully we have about 1 kilo. That's our envisaged sample mass at the moment of Bennu in our hands. And so that's something which will beat any existing samples of similar missions by a long way. I mean, we know that already, but it went better than everyone expected, let's put it that way. And so the whole team is excited, of course, and we hope that the last bit obviously goes successful, and it is not over yet, so a lot of things can go wrong, and so we don't want to count our chickens too early, but it's looking very, very good, and the risk is reduced that we don't have to do a second or a third sample attempt, which naturally has an inherent risk in it. And so it's enough sample material there, so that basically concludes the sample part of the mission, which is much better than we hoped for, so which is good. Maybe a little bit about why I'm doing this, and how does someone who lives in Mornington suddenly talks to students about OSIRIS-REx, and how does that all work? Because if you looked into any NASA programs, it's usually exclusive for US citizens, such as the Solar System Ambassador program, unfortunately not open to non-US citizens. The reason for that is the mission is run by the University of Arizona, and they are very active in science outreach in STEM. And I happen to be the principal investigator of the mission, and he's a professor at the University of Arizona, and we spoke, and we wanted to, and I suggested, look, we should do something like that, not only in the US but everywhere else. And so the whole scope was widened, and there was quite a few other interested amateurs like me who put their hand up, like in the UK and South America, a few, and there's a couple in Africa as well. So and that is actually a good thing, because when I started all this, and you know it better than me, there was no Australian Space Agency, and so it was a fantastic thing to get young people actually interested in space flight, and why it's important that we send spacecraft to an asteroid, and what we can learn from that, and it is really it's a lot of fun talking to kids and see, oh, that's how they do that, and how does it actually work in a space where you can normally only park your car. I mean, there is a lot of feedback there and a lot of interest, and I hope it will then also result in people potentially choosing a career path in that area in whatever shape or form, and if only one or two of the hundreds of kids I spoke to does that, then it would be a success, I would think. And so that's sort of my driver. From a background, you've seen I've done chemistry, chemical engineering, but I'm also an amateur astronomer for over 40 years. And that's sort of the background, because why I know Dante Loretta, because they run another program called Target Asteroids, where amateur astronomers can actually participate in proper science. And as you all know, if you're in a big city, there's a lot of light pollution. So if you do astronomy, you try to find and you want to do a little bit of science, you have to try to find the field where you can cope with light pollution, and Target Asteroids is one of them, because you take photos of asteroids that teams are interested in, and to measure their position, and also do photometry on it, and which then in turn leads to determining what the rotation period of these asteroids are. You can do spectroscopy, and you can determine what type of asteroid it is, like Bennu, for instance, a carbonaceous chondrite. So you can filter a lot of stuff out of it. And the reason why people like me do it, there's just not enough manpower and instrument power in the professional observatories there to do work like that. And that's a good little thing you can do from a small observatory in Mornington. And so that's sort of closes the circle, how that all happened. So so I'm more than happy to answer questions you may have about the mission, because I look at at your faces. And I hope that there is some questions, because it is a fantastic mission, and I'm really, really chuffed that I'm a little part of it, and which is good. So please ask away.
Thanks, Clem. That's awesome. And I think we've got a lot of questions. And as I've mentioned at the start, if you go to our Slido page, people can put in questions there. I've got a few here. So I'll ask one which I was going to ask. So this is from Colin Mackey. How does the spacecraft power to turn, eject the capsule to Earth, and the capsule navigate to a landing point?
The spacecraft is at the moment in orbit around Bennu, and you need to wait in the orbits of Bennu and the Earth that they're in the right position. Bennu is a near-Earth asteroid, and that means it in some part of its journey around the Sun, it crosses the orbit of the Earth. So the whole mechanics of the mission are so timed that you leave the asteroid with a burn. It has a monopropellant hydrazine on board. That's our propulsion, and give the spacecraft a little push, and then basically you cruise until the spacecraft intersects the Earth, and it gets caught by the Earth, and the sample return capsule gets just pushed out, similar to what you have with like when SpaceX popped their Starlink satellites out of the top of their rocket, or any other satellites spring-loaded. So it just flips out, and that's it. And it's got a little heat shield in the bottom, and it's very autonomous, the whole thing. And it's, as I said earlier, flew successfully before in a mission that went to comet called Neowise, and it went through the tail of the comet, the spacecraft, and collected some small samples on like a Mylar shield, which was stored in the sample return capsule, and that also landed in Utah. So it's proven technology, and so I'm very confident that would that will work really well.
Fantastic. I think probably a number of people might have seen on the news that they did show 3 images of showing some of the samples being in the collector, but also floating away. I believe that there was, they think they might have lost some of the samples, but you're saying they think they've captured a significant amount. Do you want to talk us through that?
The whole sample process where is new technology, has never been tried anywhere else than on one of the zero gravity flights, and so inherent risk, but it worked really well. So how the sample is collected, it's like a disc that gets for about 3 seconds pressed against the surface, and the surface is disturbed through compressed nitrogen, which is stored in 3 bottles, one for each potential sampling attempt. And once the sampling head touches the surface, the nitrogen is released and disturbs the regolith on the surface and pushes it in the sampling ring outside of the sampling head. And there is, once the spacecraft returned, of course, a lot of loose material there, and there was in the sampling chamber a little bit of loose material. However, it is possible to determine roughly the sample size and weight by performing a number of spacecraft maneuvers. So you can actually, by tumbling the spacecraft around its axis, and knowing its prior weight distribution, you can determine how the rough estimates about 1 kilo, which is well beyond what was expected.
So there's no issue with overloading that sample container? They think it's going to be in and sealed properly?
Look, I mean, it will be covered in microscopic particles. There is also on the bottom of the sampling head, like little Velcro strips, which are designed to hold also material just in case something goes wrong with the initial sample attempt. And so that will provide extra material, but also that there's literally no gravity there worthwhile mentioning. So everything that is somehow adhering to the sample head can float away. I mean, everyone who's seen footage from any spacecraft, there are always little bits and pieces floating away, and naturally we stuck that sampling head in the middle of the this loose material, and which is very light and porous, and so naturally you lose a little bit, but that's quite expected, and it's not a problem.
No worries. One of our attendees, Stephen, asks, what angle does the re-entry capsule hit the Earth's atmosphere? Any idea what that might be?
Oh dear. When I'm honest, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can get that to you. That's not a problem.
That's all right. Colin's got a couple more here. Sorry, they're tracking up. Are there any issues orbiting a very low gravity object such as Bennu? And also he asks, he believes that that the scientists were somewhat surprised at the softness of the surface. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Around an object with such low gravity, because orbiting around the moon or whatever is very easy in comparison, or a larger asteroid like Ceres or Vesta, which has been done. OSIRIS-REx has on the surface a gravity of about 100,000 of the Earth. So it's you would float away when you just move your arm. As it's very, very low. Naturally, to stay in orbit around that is quite tricky, and but you can work with the asteroid, and also it rotates in 4.5 hours once around the axis, and you can use that to map the surface, so you let the asteroid do the work, and you're actually more or less static there and float along. You can do that and use the little thrusters just to minutely adjust your position. To the second part, yes, the surface very brittle, and that was a bit of a surprise. And at the moment, the general gist is it has something to do that potentially in the past water was in some of these surface rocks, which outgassed, and then you left with a rather porous material. And you could see that in the video footage when the sampling head actually touches the ground. It really some of the little rocks, they break apart, they just fall into dust, which in turn helped the sampling, which was a good thing. And but it's a lot of unexpected things which Bennu showed, which no one would have thought of. I mean, first of all, these big rocks on the surface are quite unusual, and then the fact that they are actually almost compared to a bit of charcoal, so you can crumble it. You probably could crumble it in your hand. That's how soft the material is, and so. Very interesting, and there will be a decade of science still pouring out of that mission when it's long over, spacecraft-wise. So, for instance, one thing that came up recently is the fact with spectroscopy you can determine the composition of rocks on the surface. So the team found, for instance, that there are some rocks which are seemingly from another asteroid, Vesta, on the surface. So Bennu must have scooped these bits up on its way around the sun at some stage, because they are a little bit like fingerprints, and that's why you also can often link meteorites which you may find back to certain asteroids which are in the solar system. So when you have the comparison, the composition of your meteorite, you often can say that's a lunar meteorite, you have a Martian, you have a Ceres one, and in that case a piece of Vesta ended up on Bennu, which is quite interesting.
So do these asteroids have a unique chemical composition that allows you to identify one asteroid against another?
It's a bit like a fingerprint, and you can determine that. It's quite interesting. And maybe a little bit of background. So when you look at asteroids similar to meteorites, you have rocky asteroids, you have iron ones, and then you've got these rare cases of carbonaceous asteroids like Bennu. Some of you may recall that was 2019 was sort of the year of asteroid missions. You had the Japanese Hayabusa mission, Hayabusa 2, which went to an asteroid called Ryugu. That's a rocky asteroid, and that looked almost identical to Bennu. So do yourself a favor, look it up. They look like twins, unbelievable, and also lots of rocks on the surface. Hayabusa also brings a sample back, which actually lands in December in Australia. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. So that is also a really great success, and both teams actually worked really close together because the missions are very similar. Sample acquisition a little bit different. Hayabusa, they shot some big bullets into the asteroid and collected the ejector out of these holes, and but on the other side they had some cool stuff on board where they had little hopping rovers which were deployed on the surface. So and like you often see in international space flight and the ISS, teams like that work together because you only can make it better. And so naturally the OSIRIS-REx team was very, very keen to see how Hayabusa would go with their sampling and orbiting around their asteroid, because it was literally a twin of Bennu. And so a lot of that has been learned, especially in terms of the final approach, because the aircraft the spacecraft is totally autonomous. So and that's something you always have to keep in mind, that it's like with the Martian rovers, the spacecraft and the asteroid are so far away there is no time to react. So if it goes wrong, it will go wrong. And so big plus to the team in of Lockheed Martin and so on, who built the spacecraft, and the programmers who did all their work. The hours which are in there are incredible, and there's 20 years of work in the spacecraft, which is as big as a Mazda 2. So it's a lot of people have invested their life's work in it.
Sure. A couple of questions. I've got one from Kate. If and when the sample makes it back to Earth, what will be done with it?
Most of the most of the sample will go actually in storage, similar to the lunar samples, because they are utterly precious. And then a small part will get given to a variety of research groups around the globe. So if, for instance, someone here in Australia at Monash, a friend of mine, does this early solar system formation research, if he puts a good request in and has a good proposal, you can get a few grams.
Wow. Is there any concern that there might be some biological contamination or monsters that could be brought to Earth with this? I've seen the movies, you know.
Yes, I think obviously just in order not to contaminate the sample rather than contaminating Earth with the sample, there is a lot of precaution that will be taken. So opening of the sample return capsule will happen in clean rooms, and the utmost care will be taken with the samples, because it's a once-off. We won't go back in a hurry.
Question from Anonymous. What happens to the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft after it discharges the capsule? Can it does it burn up, or can it be reused for other missions?
There might be a little bit of life left, but like with all spacecraft of that type, in the end, it boils down to propellant, and you'll find that it will be after the sample return capsule is released, it will be basically put to sleep, and it'll go forever around.
So it's a solar-powered vehicle. It's not.
Yes, it's got two solar panels on it, and that's obviously not a problem. But you'll find that the propulsion of the spacecraft, that's an issue. And I mean, there's always interest to find a secondary target. So you might find it's not totally out of the question, but that there's a bit of a look for some Trojan asteroids which can follow the Earth. So the Earth catches regularly smaller bodies. Sorry, my camera's playing up. I hope you're not getting seasick.
You need a new floor manager.
And so the Earth catches regularly smaller asteroids that can be 50 meters or so in diameter, and they're called Trojan asteroids. So they travel in front of the Earth and a little bit behind the Earth in its orbit. And already at the flyby in 2017, we had a look for that. And so it's quite possible that we give it another shot. And I mean, definitely we will take a photo of the moon and the Earth when we come back, that's for sure. But what happens then, in the end, like always, it's the money, and if you get the budget to do a little bit more science, and it's the way things go. But the main purpose of the mission was go to Bennu, look at the asteroid, do science there, bring a sample back, and it's looking good. So I'm very positive, and the team is.
Just a couple more questions. Colin, I've lost it. Has Bennu caused us to think differently about the whole asteroid belt, maybe affecting future mission plans and science?
So, sorry, can you repeat that?
Has it caused us to think differently about the whole asteroid belt? About it?
No, and also Bennu is not sort of your typical asteroid in how it's often described, the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It's a near-Earth asteroid. That's one of the reasons why it was interesting, because there is the remote possibility, 1 in 2,500, that in about 100 to 200 years, on one of these intersections of the orbits, Bennu might actually come fairly close to Earth. And so it's a potential impactor, and with 500 meters diameter, the damage is or would be huge. Sure. So there lies one interest, and the other interest is to understand how a body like that actually behaves, because there is one effect called the Yarkovsky effect, and you can compare it to when the sun shines onto a bit of hot or a bit of bitumen during the day. It warms up, and during the night, the road radiates the warmth back, and when you do that with an asteroid like Bennu, which is black, similar to the moon. Most people think the moon's white. It's not. It's actually quite dark, and Bennu is pitch black. If you would have a piece here, and so it warms up on the sun side, and as it turns, it radiates that heat away, and this radiation actually can change the orbit of an object. That's called the Yarkovsky effect, and so understanding of that effect on a body like Bennu will lead to better understanding of how the orbits of bodies like Bennu change over time, and when I mean over time, that's thousands of years, but what can happen. So there needs to be a bit of a better understanding there. We don't know everything in that respect, and also what can we do to prevent that an asteroid like Bennu potentially hits Earth. And so at the moment, not much. And so the more we know in that respect, the better it is. Not every asteroid behaves the same. So Bennu is a bit special, being a carbonaceous asteroid, but it has other traits that could be of interest, such as resource in the future, because it's got interesting materials on it, which could be of great use if you do deep space missions. You could stop past an asteroid like that, mine certain resources, and use them for the continuation of your mission. And hence, the more we know about bodies like that, the better it is. And as we've seen, we thought we we know how Bennu would look like when we arrive, and it's completely different. So do we know everything? No, absolutely not. And so every visit to an asteroid will be a surprise. And like the Dawn mission to Ceres and Vesta, for instance, which finished a couple of years ago, also brought totally different results no one expected, and similar with Bennu, and similar with Hayabusa too, same thing. So that's why it's so important that missions like that actually happen, and so great thing. And yeah, I'm really proud of our little spacecraft that it did so well.
Wayne asks, is there a major reason why we chose Bennu as a target?
Carbonaceous chondrite, rare, and that's why it was chosen, and because no one has got a pristine sample of a carbonaceous chondrite. You have to see. People ask, but you can look on the Earth or the Moon or whatever, but the material on the Earth and Moon has been turned over oodles of times, and you've got active geology there, whereas these asteroids are a little bit like your benchtop when you bake the cake. So what's left on it, that's your ingredients, and that's the leftover ingredients when baking the solar system, and that's why they're so interesting, because you get pristine material which is billions of years old.
So I'll tell you, carbonaceous, for the non-geologists amongst us, it's a rock, type of rock?
It's basically a big piece of coal, if you want. And occasionally you get carbonaceous chondrite as a meteorite. There was a quite well-known fall in Victoria in the I think late 60s or something like that in Murchison, and that was a carbonaceous chondrite, and I had the fortune to get hold of a piece and have a look at it, and actually it smells. You can smell the organic material in there. It's quite something, and this is gold for anyone who works in that field. So and unlike meteorites, if you get a pristine sample from a body like Bennu, that's elevates it to a different level.
So how are those type of rocks formed? They're not volcanic. They're just what?
No, it's part of the formation of the early solar system, and eventually you have bits forming together of organic material, which happens to clump together, and that's not quite well understood how it works. I mean, you know, if you get a stony meteorite, for instance, or a stony asteroid, that's often out of the mantle of a proto body. If you get a lump of nickel iron, like a lot of nickel iron meteorites, that's out of the core of a body like that. And similar, there are these carbonaceous chondrites, which can be sort of put to a degree in a group like comets. Certain comets have a lot of organic material in it, and so it's not quite understood how they formed, and hence getting a sample there definitely helped to understand it a little bit better and make some better educated guesses.
So they identified the material that it was made from. How did they do that? The spectrometry, or?
Yes, yeah, you can use a variety of spectrometry, and you get a fingerprint of the composition you've got there. And there's certainly some interesting materials there, similar to comets. You can do that without going there, because you can you see the tail of comets, and you can do beautiful spectroscopy on that, and it can tell, you can see what's in there.
Right. Okay. Wayne's asked, would there be any chance of carbonaceous chondroids to lose it or transform its pure characteristics once they arrive on Earth?
Yeah.
I presume it'll be at an atmospheric quarantine, but gravity, would that affect it as well?
It gets cooked a bit, and yes, and of course, if it hits the ground, it gets contaminated. But it's still. It would be still a great sample. I mean, if one hits the ground in your garden, good luck to you. It's like winning Tats Lotto, because they're quite expensive. But you want to get a sample like that as pristine as possible. So golden rule, if you ever find a meteorite, a fresh one, never touch it with your hand, not because you burn yourself or whatever. You rather get a freeze, because they're actually inside quite cold. But not to contaminate it. Take a glove, put it over it, and keep it pristine. That's what the scientists want.
All right, Clem, we've run over time a bit. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much. If you'd like to stick around for the rest of the evening, most people hang around after the event, and we keep going and have chats. If you're more than welcome to stay, and people are more than welcome to ask further questions later on.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me. I'm more than happy to pop around to one of the meetings when it's happening in person again. That'll be fantastic.
That'll be great.
And which has the added benefit that I can bring some samples along from meteorites, etc. And I mean, I think it's always something cool that you have something in your hand that is over 2 billion years old. And
sounds great.
So more than happy. Also, you can find me on Twitter. I believe you pop that on some of your messages. If you have any questions or want to know, to help out.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Clem. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Great. All right. I'm going to pick up with the rest of the show now. And well, go here. And share that. The second half of tonight, we'll be looking at the 20th anniversary of the International Space Station. I've got a lot of slides here, so I don't know whether I'll get through them all anyway. We'll see. The International Space Station. 20 years of manned occupation of the space station itself, actually. So it's been actually up there for a little longer than that, but I'm going to take you through the history of it, etc. So, over here we go. All right, so we're just going to quickly go through. So the origins of the International Space Station. I love this quote: "The Earth is a cradle of humanity, but one cannot live in the cradle forever." That's Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. And he had a book in 1883 called Free Space. He drew sketches of what he imagines a spaceship orbiting the Earth might look like, including several occupants floating weightlessness. How about that? Isn't that fantastic? 1883. All right. So moving to the 50s, Werner von Braun had ideas of large orbiting space stations. He envisaged a wheel-shaped facility to slowly rotate and provide gravity. At the time, the technologies weren't available or foreseeable, but around that time, NASA was formed in 1958, and they began considering more modest space stations. Here's his nice 1950s concepts. Maybe we'll get there one day. It'd be nice. JFK in 1961 pronounced that everyone was going to go off to the moon as a national goal, so plans for a space station took a back seat. Obviously that was a big priority. The Space Task Force group that Nixon commissioned in 1969, obviously this is at the end of the Apollo program, to assess post-Apollo space project, proposed an Earth-orbiting space station for the mid-70s, and followed later by a much larger space base among several other projects. So this was the Space Task Group. Of course, the economic realities, the Vietnam War was raging, etc., etc. They also included a space shuttle, and basically the shuttle was the only thing that received funding going forward. So here's Nixon looking at the model at that stage of the space shuttle. There was a space station that got up there by the Americans. I'm talking about here, of course. This is a post-Apollo. This is a Apollo applications program, and they flew Skylab, which was an unused third stage of a Saturn V rocket. So that was up there for a couple of years, and eventually some of it came back to Australia. So they had 3 missions up to this Skylab. In the 1984 State of the Union, Reagan directed NASA to develop a permanently manned space station and to do it within a decade, echoing JFK, and they do it in a decade type thing. And explicitly stated that the United States would invite other nations to join in and spell out the benefits to be derived by that. He opened the Space Station Program Office and invited aerospace industry to submit proposals, which they went ahead. So this was kind of the idea, the methodological step: Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Skylab shuttle, and then space station. 85, they envisaged 120-metre power tower-like truss with pressurised modules, etc., going up. 7 shuttle flights would be required to build it. And then in 85, they held a Space Station International User Workshop in Copenhagen. The European Space Agency preliminarily agreed to contribute a pressurised lab and polar orbiting free-flying platform to the project. It's never actually took place, anyway. 86, they approved a new configuration for the space station, expanding it 95 by 45 metres, assembled out of 5 by 5 cubic sections. Astronomy payloads would be attached. Pressurised modules, solar arrays would be attached to that. By mid-year, the US allies agreed on their roles. Japan, the European Space Agency, would contribute pressurised labs, and Canada would build a robotic arm, which they'd been doing. Then 86 came around, and of course we lost Challenger, early 86. And that put a big brake on the space station project, and they had to scale down its plans. As a result, low expectations, NASA reduced the design of the station to a single truss. The original dual keel configuration could be reached in the future, however. Launch of the space station was then pushed back to 1995. NASA and the contractors went through a so-called program requirement reviews, and the program, contract work schedules, etc., were all readjusted to the latest funding levels. Second half of 88, negotiations between NASA and the foreign partners on the cooperation in the development of the space station finally concluded. And as the space shuttle returned to flight, 12 nations signed a formal agreement on their participation in the program. On the 20th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission, George Bush Sr. called for a return to the moon manned mission to Mars within a so-called Space Exploration Initiative. And they reckon the space station would be a launch pad for such plans. Different earlier schedule studies looked at possible roles, and it could play manned planetary missions. It was never implemented. The space station program faced severe budget cuts. In October, the US Congress cuts in the space station budget for 1991 by $551 million. Total $6 billion have been cut during the 91 to 96 period. And as a result, NASA started another redesign project. So this was kind of the concept in 1991. It was going to be an 878 cubic metres, 400 by 400 kilometre orbit, and orbital inclination of about 28.5 degrees. Remember that number because we'll come back to it later on. So this is kind of the orbit, the ideal shuttle launch inclination was at 28 degrees. So that matched perfectly with the shuttle. 1991, after a 5-month review, NASA scaled down the station, pressurised labs and HAB modules. They were shortened. They reduced in size and length, and the main thrust was shortened to 108 metres. Launch of the first element was pushed back to 1995, November 1995. In the meantime, during a summit in Moscow, Bush and Gorbachev signed an agreement to send a US astronaut to Mir and fly a Russian cosmonaut on the space shuttle. After his inauguration in 1989, George W. Bush did not automatically follow the policy of his predecessor, Ronald Reagan, in dealing with Gorbachev and the Soviet Union. And his glasnost policies of Gorbachev pushed the government transparency and increased freedom of expression. And after a tumultuous year of unrest, including an attempted coup, 1991 would end with Gorbachev's resignation and the collapse of the Soviet Union. Here's Boris Yeltsin, the president of the Russian Federation, making a speech on top of a tank in Moscow. So the world's changed. So Russia now entered the scene where NASA concluded that it would be able to address the issue that they had of emergency return from the space station quickly and economically by incorporating the Soyuz spacecraft into its design. And in 3 months, after 3 months of negotiation in June, Dan Golden and Yuri Koptev ratified a contract between NASA and MPO Unger, to study possible use of Soyuz and Russian docking port on the Freedom project. October 1992, NASA and the Russian Space Agency signed an agreement about a space shuttle mission to Mir in 1995. And that agreement, they would pick up a US astronaut, 2 Russian cosmonauts after a 3-month mission and return them to the US. Then we have Bill Clinton in 1993, moved in January. NASA was directed to redesign the space station, feed them again to keep annual spending on the project within $2.1 billion. The NASA redesign team established on March 10 came up with 3 options. There was option A, option B, and option C. However, none of them would meet the projected budget restrictions, so they weren't really adopted. 1993, at that time, the Russian Space Agency proposed to NASA that they merge Freedom and their Mir 2 projects, which they were working on. The inclusion of the Mir 2 core module to the Freedom design would allow early presence of crew on board, while the use of the Progress cargo ships would provide much cheaper and reliable refueling and supply capabilities compared with using the space shuttle. So this was the Mir 2 as it was envisaged after Mir 1, and here's obviously the Progress resupply. September the 2nd, Russian Prime Minister and Vice President Al Gore signed an agreement to merge Mir 2 and Freedom. The launch of the first component was then expected to go to 1997. Russian partnership also makes access to the US, the ISS, more challenging because of its orbit. To be accessible to rockets launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome at 45 degrees latitude. So you can see the orbits that we talked about before, the inclination of the shuttle, effectively Kennedy Space Center, of 28 degrees, and then the Baikonur of 45 degrees. But the Russians used 51.6 degrees, and I'll get to that in a second. But the problem with that is that, of course, it requires the shuttle to push up much further and reduce the amount of payload by having to have more fuel to get up to that higher inclination. So a lot of the people in the US space community weren't very happy about bringing the bloody Russians involved. But anyway, The reason for the difference between the 45 degrees that Baikonur and the 51.6, which is what they end up using, is that the Russians didn't want to have overfly of China in case they had some of their boosters and other things landing on China and causing problems. So, although China seems to do a pretty good job of doing that themselves. Anyway. So, yeah, that's the reason. So that's part of the challenge and the limitation of having the shuttle and having any vehicle coming from the US up to the space station is the high inclination that it's flying. 1994, NASA and the Russian Space Agency established a new assembly sequence to reflect the inclusion of the Near 2 components. The first element, Zarya control module, was now scheduled for November 97. The assembly was planned to be completed by 2002. There's the Zarya module being built. 95, the Russia firmly decided to abandon its plans to use a Zenit rocket for the launch of the Science and Power platform. NASA agreed to launch that element on the space shuttle. And the Russian Space Agency considered transfer of Mir's newest module, Spectre and Proida, to the ISS. In December, US astronauts took residence aboard Mir, and the Russian Space Agency proposed NASA use the entire Mir space station as the base for the ISS assembly. However, NASA did reject that idea. 896, a significant amount of the US hardware had been built despite technical difficulties and around $200 million in cost overruns. Russia, the construction of the service module fell behind schedule back due to lack of funds. And in the fall, Russian Space Agency informed NASA that it would not be able to launch the Zvezda service module in April 1998. So in response, NASA initiated the development of an interim control module based on the propulsion module of a classified military satellite. You can see that interim control module there in that graphic there. 97, in April, given the uncertainty surrounding the Russian contribution, NASA requested Congress to create a new line item called the Russian Program Assurance in the budget to finance construction of the interim control module and other contingency options. 1997, the Congress approved $200 million as part of that Russian program. The launch of the first element of the space station was pushed back to from November 97 to June 1998, and that's going to be on the Proton rocket. Russian delays gave NASA additional time for on-ground testing of the US space hardware. And actually that was a bit of a benefit because it reduced the cost plus the integration problems during orbital assembly. So they got a bit of a benefit out of all of that, which was good. In 1998, the partners of the International Space Station project signed a formal intergovernmental agreement. However, the Russian participants of the project continued to struggle with delayed funding. US elements fell behind schedule due to technical problems. And in January, during the Council of Chief Designers in Russia, it was indicated that the launch of the Zvezda module would be delayed 4 months beyond what was the original launch date. 1998, the same month, the Zarya control module was shipped to Baikonur to be processed. And in October, NASA and the Russian Space Agency agreed the launch of the first element on November 20. And that took place as scheduled, and in December, the US Space Shuttle launched the Unity module to the Zarya component. At the time, the service module was scheduled for April 1999 and was expected to be delayed until June 1999. All right, the Zarya control module was, I'll just do that slide, but there's a picture of the module Unity. 1999, in April, they agreed to delay the launch of the Zvezda module from June to September. The launch was then delayed until November as they struggle to complete work on the module. Wiring problems on the shuttle threatened the program, so big delays in the shuttle as well. Finally, at the end of 99 to January 2000, a Proton rocket at around that time carrying a communications satellite failed for the second time, grounding the launch vehicle and prompting extensive investigation, engine upgrades, which would take several months. The Proton rocket returned to service in February, and manufacturers were still testing modified engines which would be used on the Proton launching Bethesda. And they decided to conduct 2 more test flights of that modified Proton rocket before naming the launcher to carry the service module. 2000, NASA split its shuttle logistics mission into 2 in order to repair and maintain the embryonic ISS. And in July, the Bethesda successfully reached orbit. Several days later, thorough Unity stack flawlessly docked to the service module. The first Progress cargo ship was also arrived on schedule in September, and the shuttle delivered the Z-Truss structure to the space station. And they also delivered a docking adapter as well. So the docking adapter to the bottom, the Z-Truss structure is at the top there on that graphic you can see. Finally, we get to the first crew, November 2000, 20 years ago. First resident crew of the space station, Bill Shepard, American, and the 2 Russian cosmonauts, Yuri Gitsenko and Sergei Krikalev, boarded the outpost. In December, the shuttle attached a set of solar arrays and radiators, making it the biggest orbital structure. So there we go. It's starting to get big now. February of 2001, the shuttle Atlantis delivered Destiny, but they had financial problems back on Earth with the ISS project. Multi-billion-dollar cost overruns, but they were forced to cancel development of the US habitation module and reusable rescue vehicle for the station. There's that habitation module, and there's that rescue vehicle that they had planned, and that actually turns up later on as another vehicle, which we probably are familiar with. 2002, the station's main truss, designed to hold giant power plants and other systems, started stemming from the original core. A total of 3 segments in the truss had been added during shuttle missions. Back on Earth, the partners in the project tried to develop a solution to the financial problems facing the endeavour. However, little progress had been reached. And then we come to February of 2003. Obviously, the Columbia Space Shuttle. And the loss of the shuttle, Columbia Space Shuttle, essentially grounded all the US manned space program for the indefinite period of time and stalled the construction of the station. These are the 3 occupants of the space station at that particular time. So they sort of wondered how they would have, although they did have the Soyuz, of course. Despite the possibility of leaving the station uninhabited during the hiatus, the US manned space program, Russia committed to keeping the outpost manned. The Russian Soyuz spacecraft, which previously played the role of the lifeboat, re-emerged as the only link to the space station for its crews. So here's a picture of the Soyuz. Don't know many people have really looked at the main structure of the Soyuz, but there's a good graphic of it. At the same time, the Progress spaceships remained the only supply line to and from Earth for them as well. There's a Progress there. Look very similar, but obviously one's unmanned and the other one is purely a manned vehicle. In order to save resources on board the space station and the absence of the shuttle, they agreed to reduce the long-duration crew from 3 to 2 back then. 2004, George W. Bush directed NASA to initiate plans for a return to the moon using funds freed by the cancellation of the space shuttle program and the withdrawal of the US from the ISS. Unlike a lot of these Republicans that claim that Barack Obama cancelled the shuttle. Anyway, according to the plan, the shuttle would be retired in 2010 upon the completion of the space station. And 2016, NASA funding would end for the ISS. 2005, the 10th long-duration crew of the ISS met the new year with problems with the electron oxygen generating unit. As underfunded, understaffed, and sometimes undersupplied station continued its mission on the ground, NASA prepared the shuttle to return to orbit in 2005. In 2006, partners in the ISS approved a new assembly sequence which dedicated 16 remaining shuttle flights before its retirement in 2010 to finish off the ISS. As expected in 2005, the delivery of the Russian NEP science power platform moved module by the shuttle was cancelled along with another utilisation flights. NASA promised to compensate the Russians for loss of power by providing energy from the US segment. So this is the configuration around about that time. It didn't end up changing a whole lot from then, the various modules. It's kind of what we've got today. A bit hard to read some of that, but this is all, by the way, this whole presentation has been recorded on YouTube, so if people found me whizzing through the slides a bit too fast, you can certainly go back and take a look at the whole thing on YouTube and review it. Take your time looking through it. 2006, without major delays or accidents in the shuttle program, the station would reach capability of supporting 6-person crew by 2009. European Columbus module was now scheduled for launch on the 7th shuttle mission after its return to flight, while elements of the Japanese segment would reach orbit during the 8th, 9th and 12th mission. NASA was then evaluating the possibility of sending the shuttle to service the Hubble Space Telescope for the last time as early as beginning of 2008, and it would be the only mission of the shuttle not dedicated to assembly of the ISS, and of course not being able to have that ability to shelter at the ISS if there was a problem with the heat shield, as what happened with Columbia. That was a bit of a risk, but they gained confidence enough to go ahead and do it. 2007, in order to fill a gap in its manned space program, retirement of the shuttle in 2010, spacecraft around 2014, the US turned to Russia. And in December 2006, they ordered 2 Progress cargo ships to resupply, and a pair of Soyuz lifeboats, and a pair of Progress ships annually between 2009 and 2011 to cover themselves for that interim period. Combined with flights to its own segment, Russian transport traffic to the ISS was expected to double during this period. And in 2007, they announced that they would sign a 790 million modification to the ISS contract with Russia for crew and cargo services through to 2011. The firm fixed price extension covered crew rotations for 15 crew members, 6 in 2009, 6 in 2010, and 3 in 2011, delivery and removal of 5.6 tonnes of cargo. 2007, the commercial orbital transportation program were still planned to provide the bulk of the cargo transportation needs from 2010 and beyond to the space station. With the modification, NASA also purchased the capability for the Russian docking cargo module to carry 1.4 tonnes of NASA cargo to the station in 2010. And by adding that module, NASA would be able to fly outfitting hardware for the Russian multi-purpose laboratory module, eliminating the need to fly cargo carrier and ballast on the shuttle. NASA was obligated to deliver the Russian outfitting hardware to the station under a 26th addendum to the ISS balance of contributions agreement with NASA, or with Russia. NASA also purchased flight opportunity to and from the station that would meet an obligation to its international partners, and flight would allow for national partners to spend approximately 6 months aboard the station in 2009. The total price of those deals were $790 million and included 15 seats and 5.6 tonnes of cargo. 2008, in the spring, Vitaly Lopota, head of the Russian key station contractor RKK Energia, told Russian media that the federal funding for the ISS had to double in order to complete the various modules by 2015. And according to him, 100 billion rubles had been allocated to the development of the Russian segment. However, an additional 120 billion was needed. In the meantime, the partners in the ISS project were to meet in Paris in July to discuss the financial possibility for extending the service of the station from 2015 to 2020. 2008, in April, in the Aviation Week, reported that NASA administrator at the time, Mike Griffin, had sent a letter to Capitol Hill specifically excluding Russian Progress cargo ships from a request to continue using Russian Soyuz capsules to deliver crew to the ISS after the shuttle retired. Instead, NASA opted for private vehicles being developed under the Commercial Orbital Transport Services Program, the COTS program. 2008, in September 24, the House of Representatives did extend a waiver to the Iran, North Korea and Syria Non-Proliferation Act that would allow NASA to purchase seats on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft after the previous waiver was to expire. The move ensured an uninterrupted presence of American and European astronauts on the ISS during the entire projected 5-year gap between the time of the shuttle and the introduction of the Orion spacecraft. 2009, the addition of the fourth and last power generating section was finally ready to go up to its full 6-member crew, and that was achieved in May of 2009. On the ground, partners continued studying options for extending the life of the ISS beyond 2015, and the final decision on the matter was not expected until 2010, but they were optimistic they could get it to 2020. The end of May announced that NASA announced that it would reach a $306 million deal with Russia on the Soyuz missions, and each flight reportedly costing $51 million. In 2010, the Obama administration published a proposed budget for the US federal government in curtailing funding for the Constellation program, with plans of returning to the moon on hold. The ISS automatically received a new lease of life. A formal decision for the ISS lifespan extension was made on March 11 in Tokyo. Heads of agencies know that there were no technical constraints to support the ISS beyond 2015 to at least 2020, and that the partnership was working to certify on-orbit elements through 2028. The 2011 budget, consistent with the US administration's budget request to allow the agency to support ISS to at least 2020, partners emphasised their common intent to work with the respective governments to continue that into the next decade. In mid-March, with the retirement of the Space Shuttle only 3 months away, NASA announced the purchase of 12 more seats on the to get up to the ISS. And ESA member states approved participation in the ISS till 2020. 2012, during a meeting in Canada, Russia proposed outposts from 6 to 9 months or even to a year by 2020, 2014, 2015. And the goal of that was to free up Soyuz commercial seats for commercial missions. Russians and Europeans reportedly voiced their support for Chinese involvement in the ISS, despite legal hurdles in the US and the closed military nature of the Chinese manned spaceflight program. Russia also initiated backup hardware in order to have extra Soyuz and Progress vehicles on 30-day readiness at the end of 2013. 2012, in the meantime, the Dragon spacecraft built by SpaceX reached the space station for the first time in May, opening up a new supply line to the ISS. 2013, President Obama signed a law extending US payments to Russia for its ISS services to NASA from July 2016 to December 31, 2020. In February, Alexei Kresenov, the head of the Manned Directorate at Roscosmos, told the semi-official Interfax news agency that by the end of March, NASA had hoped to sign an agreement with NASA for extending flights of astronauts from partner agencies aboard the ISS, aboard Soyuz from mid-2016 to 2017. 2013, at the end of 2013, Kresenov said that US and Russia reached an agreement on NASA Soyuz missions until the end of 2017 and possibly beginning 2018 when the US would switch to its own vehicles. The deal was signed in April 26th and publicly announced on May 1st. In the meantime, Orbital Sciences Corporation, under a NASA contract, launched a mass prototype of the Cygnus cargo vehicle on its Antares rocket powered by Soviet Mk-33A rocket engine. The first launch of the US manned spacecraft to the ISS was scheduled for November 30, 2017. Right. The blessing from the Obama administration to operate the space station to at least 2024 at around $3 billion a year. And extending the lifespan to the outpost was considered 2028 was considered technically feasible. However, in the wake of the Russian annexation of Crimea, NASA suspended its cooperation with NASA, except for the ISS. So at least they cooperated on that. Russia threatened to end its participation in the ISS by 2020, which most partners interpreted as a bluff. In an unapproved draft of a 10-year federal space program starting in 2016, Roscosmos requested 321 billion rubles for the Russian segment of the ISS, including the OKAT free-flying platform, which I don't think has ever made it off the ground. 2015, Roscosmos announced a leak of dangerous chemicals on the ISS. Took place at the US segment. As a result, the affected part of the outpost to be isolated and the crew evacuated to the Russian segment. Contamination level on the Russian segment remained within the allowable limits. According to the chief of Russian mission control, the safety of the crew was ensured thanks to the cooperation and quick actions of cosmonauts and astronauts and support of the groups in Moscow and Houston. However, later NASA announced that the evacuation of the crew was most likely caused by a false alarm. There was no direct data to confirm the actual ammonia leak. 2016, NASA has awarded 3 CRS-2 cargo delivery contracts to the ISS worth $14 billion from 2019 to 2024. They selected Orbital ATK, Sierra Nevada Corporation, and SpaceX. And that would be a minimum of 6 cargo resupply missions from each provider using the Cygnus, Dream Chaser, and Dragon spacecraft. In January, Roscosmos and NASA signed a 5.7 billion ruble contract for delivery of 6 astronauts to the ISS on the Soyuz that price went up, didn't it? 2018 to 2019, 5.7 billion rubles. Okay. 2016, the first inflatable habitat was deployed on the ISS. And at that same time, the Roscosmos made the decision to reduce its crew on the ISS from 3 to 2 and initiated the development of a new cargo ship for the station. The Russian crew would have to go back to 3 people from the beginning of Expedition 57 to support integration of the MLN Mercury module. That's that module there. Unger officially informed Roscosmos that in order to support 3 Russian cosmonauts aboard the ISS, 4 Progress cargo ships would have to be dispatched to the outpost in 2019. 3-member crew would be necessary to integrate the MLM Mercury module, which finally saw light at the end of the tunnel. January 11, 2018, NASA announced that its contractors SpaceX and Boeing will be launch unmanned test versions of their vehicles in August, followed by piloted demo missions for Boeing and SpaceX in November, December. This is 2018. In the meantime, preliminary NASA budget for 2019 projected the end of the ISS funding in 2025, while Congress instructed NASA to be ready to transfer the ISS to the private sector by the same deadline. So the ISS entered a new era with the introduction of next generation US spacecraft designed to deliver crews to the outpost. Once again, the SpaceX Dragon and the Boeing Starliner were to begin carrying astronauts from US soil again. It also meant that Roscosmos had seats available aboard its Soyuz spacecraft to resume launches of their commercial passengers. November 2019, Director General of RKK Iniga signed a flight program for the ISS in 2020. For the first time in a decade, the annual manifest included only 2 launches of Russian crew vehicles going to the outpost instead of 4. The rest of the Soyuz responsibilities was to be taken over by the new generation of vehicles, if they are ready. In May, SpaceX launched its first US crew, earlier this year, on a US vehicle from US soil since 2012. Right, so what's going to happen to the ISS? Let's have a look. I'm almost finished, guys, by the way. So this might be what it ends up doing. In fact, it probably will. So according to the Outer Space Treaty, Russia and US are legally responsible for all the modules they've launched. And a controlled, targeted deorbit to a remote ocean area was considered as US ISS disposal options. As of late 2010, the preferred plan was to use a slightly modified Progress spacecraft to deorbit. This plan is seen as the simplest, cheapest, and with the highest margin. At the end of 2011, Exploration Gateway platform concept also proposed using leftover US orbital segments and Zvezda 2 as a refueling depot and service station located at one of the Earth-Moon Lagrange points. However, the entire US OS segment was not designed for disassembly and will be discarded. This is the projected gateway. February 2015, Roscosmos announced it would remain part of the ISS program till 2024. 9 months earlier, in response to US sanctions against Russia over the annexation of Crimea, they stated that Russia would reject a request to prolong the station beyond 2020 and would only supply rocket engines to the US for non-military satellite launches. And then on 2016, the General Director of RSC Eniga, maybe the ISS will receive continued resources. Today we discussed the possibility of using the station until 2028 with discussion to continue under the new presidential administration. There have also been suggestions that the station could be converted to commercial operations after it's retired by government entities. September 2018, with the intent to extend operations of the ISS to 2030 and was confirmed in December of that year. So this is a bit of a graphic of what they think, however it ends up being deorbited, the debris path of the ISS coming down. So it covers like a 6,000 kilometre strip. So we'll see what happens, what they end up doing. So we don't know. That's where we're at this stage. So no, I don't believe anyone's actually announced specific plans on what's going to happen with it. And there's things bouncing around about whether it's going to go commercial. Who knows? All right, so that's coming to the end now. We'll just have a quick look ahead, and we're almost done with our meeting tonight. So just look at upcoming launches in October, November. At this stage, these times are Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So we've got a Momo 7 flight out of Japan, Falcon 9, Atlas NRL. So those they're all on the 31st of October, so it's going to be busy. So these are Melbourne or Sydney time, Tasmania time. 11. They all seem to be 11 a.m., so it's going to be busy. We have the multi-channel. And then we've got Delta Heavy once again on the 31st at 1 p.m. The long delayed Delta Heavy. Another SpaceX launch 6th November. Rocket Lab talking about doing their Electron on the 15th of November at 11 o'clock. The Firefly Alpha maiden flight, November 21. And this is the only place I've found this. I know we've talked about it before, but the SLS first stage green run test, they've been talking about it being mid-November. I found this on one of the websites, I think it was Space Launch website. They've actually given a date and a time for that. And once again, this is Melbourne time. Oh, sorry, this is local time, US time. So they're going to be doing this 8-minute hot fire of the 4 shuttle-derived or shuttle-used engines on the stand there at Marshall Space Flight Centre, or Stanford Space Flight Centre. So that'll be pretty impressive to see. And that is about it. I'd bombard you all of that. I had a lot of slides here and I sort of want to try to get through it. I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go. I've got my rocket. And we can open up the mics if you want, Ash, and have a chat if everyone wants to. Well, is there any stuff coming through the slider? I don't know. No. Oh. Someone's asked, is the possibility that Elon Musk wants to provide funding into the progression of the ISS due to SpaceX? I've got no idea. I doubt it. He's got his own stuff he's working on, but maybe he will. I think he sees the ISS as yesterday's news, to be honest, in many ways, although he obviously flies crew and cargo up there. You got anything you want to ask or say, or anyone else got more questions? I'm not sure whether is Clem still online? Is what questions I might want to ask him?
Oh, it'd be good if they could actually bring the ISS down over Australia like Skylab did. I've always wanted to collect a piece of paper, space station.
Well, yes, as long as it's not in my backyard, I can tell you. Yeah. Yeah, so sorry about all those slides. I had, like, the more I looked into it, the more stuff there was. So I hope I didn't whiz through it too much, but I had a lot of stuff to cover. So I hope it was understandable. And a very interesting point there with regard to how, and I actually read a book by Walt Cunningham, the ex-Apollo 7 astronaut. He was had quite strong views about the inclusion of the Russians in the space station and the whole fact that they had to change the orbital inclination and the penalties that they've imposed on the whole project, etc., etc. He's quite opinionated there, Walt, but he's a good read.
No, that was a very interesting presentation. As currently, I've got to put a space station module together from Lego.
Oh, is that right?
I could never get my head around all the modules. So no, this was good. It clarified it a lot.
Yeah, I actually stumbled over the Gravity movie the other night, and it was just towards the end when she's jumping from one spaceship to another and it starts re-entering, and I thought, oh yeah, it'd be interesting to see the thing re-enter, because Mir was the biggest thing that came down a while ago, wasn't it? That was a huge. Although then they had the Chinese one, which was kind of a bit uncontrolled, wasn't it? Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Charlie, yes. Yes, we can.
Hopefully we enjoyed it. And please thank Mr. Unger. Is he still online, or is he getting refreshments or something?
Don't know. I don't think he's there.
Yeah.
Can't see him in the list.
I get a bit bamboozled with some of the chat links. That's why I didn't pipe up earlier. But
Yeah.
with Mr. Unger's background of interest in some chemistry features, looking at Bennu, the asteroid, right? My contemplation, and I was hoping he'd be able to give me some advice on this. If an asteroid, in whatever sort of shape or form that it is in, and it's been around for such a long time, if it has boulders on it, right, then obviously it's got to be a conglomeration of circumstances that some part of the body encountered during its subsequent lifetime and its evolution. So it having in prospect collided with another asteroid and then somehow combined in some way, right? If it's a carbonaceous body of sorts, and that's one of its interests that we've gone to it because of it, if it's got boulders on it, then obviously they weren't part of the original composition, right? At the very earliest formation of that particular body itself. So it's got a history of somehow agglutinating or combining with other debris around the place, rather sticking together, developing its carbonish process or profile. And if it's got rocks on it, then it's got some sort of a silicate disposition about it as well. So it'd be nice to sort of see when people on the ground, with their interest in the composition, can actually get an appraisal of the chemistry of the sample that we hope to bring back or hope comes back, both from a point of view of elemental, confirming spectrographic contemplations, and also from a molecular point of view, right? So if we bring back all these carbonations, all these silicates, all these mineralizations, is there a prospect that there are complexes with water associated with it, oxygen associated with it, nitrogen, sulfurs, and all that, right? And referring back to the Murchison meteor, I rather feel that if an object like that can have a smell, then for us to sense it, it'll have to have some sort of a carbon oxygen, carbon nitrogen oxygen, or carbon oxygen and sulfur ingredient to it, right? So don't think anything else can probably even generate a sense of smell for us. So it'd be nice to be able to follow all that up.
It would. Well, they're going to have some samples soon, so maybe we'll find out.
Yeah, but I'm wondering when it would be actually made available to us, right? And you're looking at the molecular side, but you're right. So how Bennu came to be in this configuration, right, doesn't suggest that it was something that was construed or constructed or combined around the initial stages of the formation of the solar system. It would have to have been itself a modified object, you know?
Well, I think Clem indicated that they feel that there might be other asteroid elements on Bennu and others. So
Yeah.
I guess it's, that whole early solar system rock, tumbling rocks and crashing into each other and sharing materials is very much of a likely possibility. Hey, we're going to wrap the meeting up. We'll keep going, but we're just recording now. So I'll just finish off with some details of the next meeting, and then we can leave this chat going. But I'll just finish off here. So the next meeting could be a disaster, or might not be a disaster. 23rd November. we're probably going to be doing virtual, but there's a slim possibility we might be able to meet if there's enough, if there's an ability to do that physically with enough people. And of course, the other part of it is even if we are, legally and technically able to do it, are people willing to actually to come in and sit down with other people in this sort of COVID environment? So we will find out those details and let you know what the arrangement is going to be. Obviously today in Melbourne, it's a very good day. We've had some great news and they've announced things opening up a bit. We don't 100% understand or fully know what that might look like by the 23rd of November. If, for example, you can only have 10 people inside a pub, it's probably not going to be practical. But if you can have 50, that would be a good thing. But then, of course, if we could have 50, but then only 5 people felt willing and able to go, well, we probably wouldn't end up doing it anyway. So we'll update you and have a chat with people and get an expression of interest about whether they would be interested if that 23rd November is going to be on. And of course, by the 23rd November, we will know what the hell's going on in the States. So we might have a lot to talk about. But anyway, this is the end of the official part of the meeting tonight. So we're going to please stay on board, but just wanted to say thank you to Clem Unger. I don't believe he's on, but just wanted to have officially noted we do appreciate him coming along and chatting to us. It was really enthralling. And thanks for Mike and Ashley and everyone else in the background to get this all organised. So